Assalamu alaikum girls. Today we are going to study about the spinal cord because we have already done half of the topic, which was about the CNS, the central nervous system, which was about the brain, and today we are going to start about the spinal cord. The CNS is composed of two parts, the spinal cord and the brain. So the brain we have already covered. Now we have to study about the spinal cord. So this is the diagram of the spinal cord which they have shown, and it shows the spinal nerves also and the spinal spinal cord also. See, your spinal cord exists like this in your body, understand? And the spinal nerves, they are connected to the spinal cord this way, and they move towards different parts of the body, any part. It goes towards your brain also, towards your legs also. So they are originating like this, understand, to carry messages towards the effectors. And they also they do what they do two kinds. They serve as a link between the body parts and the brains. They transmit nerve impulses from the body parts to the brain, and from the brain to the spinal cord. So this is actually the major function of the spinal cord. The spinal cord is in fact a tubular bundle of nerves. होता क्या है, ये bundle of nerves ही होती हैं. It starts from the brain, and it starts from the brain stem and extends to the lower back like brain. Spinal cord is also covered with meninges. Don't go into the details. Meninges is a very um, detailed topic. So actually these are layers, protective layers, and these are known as meninges. So first of all, you have to write what is spinal cord. It is a tubular bundle of nerves. It starts from the brainstem and extends to the lower back. This is the location, and then it is covered by meninges. The vertebral column surrounds and protects the spinal cord. So the vertebral column surrounds and protects the spinal cord. Remember, the vertebral column in your back is this. This is your vertebral column. For example, this is your vertebral column. So it says that the word inside the vertebral column is actually your spinal cord, and the outer region of the spinal cord. I explained you about the white matter and the gray matter. So this is what I was trying to explain, that this is your spinal cord. This pink area is your spinal cord. The white is the these are the vertebra, and inside the spinal inside the vertebral column, your spinal cord is enclosed, and the nerves are originating and they are connected to the spinal cord. See, this is the same picture as that which you have seen in your book. Okay, so this is your vertebral column, and inside the vertebral column it is enclosed, and it is enclosed in a different manner that you can sit, walk, and do everything. It's like beads. The way the beads are uh, put inside a string. This is how it works. The string is the spinal cord, and the vertebra are the beads which are protecting the spinal cord. So the vertebra is protecting the spinal cord. Now, the outer region of the spinal cord is made of white matter which has myelinated axons, and the central region is a butterfly shape that surrounds the central canal. Central canal is surrounded by a butterfly shape which is made up of gray matter, which means it contains neuron cell bodies which are not myelinated. So actually they are non-myelinated. That is why it is known as the gray matter. 31 pair of spinal nerves arise from the spinal cord, and they are mixed nerves because each contains axons of both sensory and motor nerves, because we have to receive the messages also and transmit the messages also. So two functions have been done with the help of these nerves, and that is why we call them mixed nerves. We have studied about the types of the nerves, and in the spinal cord we have mixed nerves. At the point where a spinal nerve arises from the spinal cord, there are two roots of spinal nerve. Both roots unite and form one mixed spinal nerve. See here, they if you look here if you look here carefully, here they're talking about the roots which unite to form one mixed spinal nerve. Why mixed? Because it contains a sensory, it contains two nerves, sensory nerves also and the motor nerves. So these are known as the mixed nerves. And here they are also showing the gray matter which is in the inner region, and the white matter which is in the outer region. And they were talking about the butterfly structure. So this is the butterfly structure which they were talking about, that the gray matter forms the butterfly structure, the dorsal and the ventral. Now this one is the dorsal root and this is the ventral root. Same posterior is like posterior and anterior. These are the terms which we use: posterior, anterior, dorsal and ventral. The dorsal root contains sensory axons. So see, this pink one is the sensory axon because it receives the messages from the sensory organs, and a ganglion where the cell bodies are located. This is the ganglion where the cell bodies are located, and the ventral root contains axons of the motor nerves. So this ventral root, this one, the blue one, the ventral root contains the axons of the motor neuron. So this is a ventral root, and this one is also a ventral root. This is a dorsal root, and this is also a dorsal root. The dorsal root contains sensory neurons, and the ventral root contains the motor neurons. Now the set has two functions. You already know: link between body parts and the brains. The spinal cord transmits nerve impulses. Um, I've been explaining this function repeatedly, that it transmits nerve impulses from the body parts to brain and from brain to the body parts. Number two is the spinal cord, which also acts as a coordinator. Why coordinator? Because it is responsible for some simple reflexes. क्या होते हैं simple reflexes? That will be studying afterwards. Reflex action, अगर आप लोगों ने 8th class में study किया है, then you will be knowing what is reflex action if you have studied that topic properly. Peripheral nervous system. Now remember, I told you there are two kinds of nervous system: peripheral and central. So now we are done with the central nervous system. Now comes the peripheral nervous system. The peripheral nervous system is PNS. It is composed of nerves and ganglia. So the composition is nerves and ganglia. Ganglia are the clusters of neurons, cell bodies outside CNS. Nerves arise or lead to brain and spinal cord, so they are named as cranial and spinal nerves. Now they have two kinds of nerves, whether they are cranial or spinal. See, central nervous system, and then comes the peripheral nervous system. Till here they say that this is the central nervous system. Then after the brain, related to the brain and the spinal cord, they have, I told you that peripheral means the areas where the body has ended. It contains the peripheries. The peripheries are the foots, the hands, the arms. These are the peripheries. So actually what happens is that the nerves which are originating from the brain and the spinal cord, they do what? They spread in the form of a meshwork and a network. This network, which is the peripheral nervous system, it does what? It just transmits messages. It just transmits messages, and nerves are present to transmit messages from the brain and the spinal cord. We have 12 cranial nerves. Always remember about the cranial nerves. The cranium means, remember, the cranium is the skull, which is it is the part of the it is like a bony structure which contains um, which contains brain. The brain is enclosed in a cranium, so the cranial will be the area related to the brain. 31 pair and 31 pair of spinal nerves. So some of the nerves are originating from the brain and some of them are originating from the spinal cord. Some cranial nerves are sensory, some are motor, and some are mixed. On the other hand, all spinal nerves are mixed nerves. All spinal nerves are mixed nerves. But some some of the cranial nerves are sensory, some of them are motor, and some of them are mixed. But the spinal nerves, all of them are mixed. All of them are mixed. The cranial and the spinal nerves make two pathways: sensory pathway conducting impulses from receptors and the motor pathway conducting impulses from the CNS to effectors. ये अगर आप लोगों को समझ आएगी अगर आप लोग गौर से सुनोगे. The cranial and spinal nerves, they make two pathways, sensory pathway and the motor pathway. Always remember what is the sensory pathway, that it will be conducting messages from the receptors to the central nervous system. What is the central nervous system? The brain and the spinal cord. And what is the motor pathway? The motor pathway is the pathway which conducts impulses from the central nervous system to the effectors. The effectors can be muscles and they can be organs also. मोटर पाथवेज मेक्स, अब मोटर पाथवे के जो सिस्टम है उसके दो सिस्टम्स होते हैं. नाउ इफ़ यू लुक एट द टेबल विच दे हैव शोन, सी the brain and the spinal cord, they make the cranial and spinal nerves. The cranial and spinal nerves have two pathways: sensory pathway and motor pathway. Sensory pathway means they are receiving the uh, conducting the nerve impulses from the receptors to the CNS. So actually they are receiving the messages. And the motor pathway means they are uh, they are sending the messages. They are taking the messages from the central nervous system to the effectors. Now again, motor pathway has two systems: somatic nervous system and autonomic nervous system. And now, so in case of somatic nervous system, it is responsible for the conscious and voluntary actions. यानी जो चीज़ें हम होश में करते हैं, when we are conscious we do certain actions, and these actions are known as voluntary actions, which are like sleeping, like going, walking. Consciously we are doing some things, like not sleeping. During sleep we are unconscious, but includes all of the motor neurons that conduct impulses from the CNS to the skeletal system. क्या होता है यहाँ पे? It conducts impulses from the CNS to the skeletal muscles. Next one is the autonomic nervous system. It is responsible for the activities which are not under conscious control. So these activities are not under conscious control. For example, they consist of motor neurons. See, it consists of motor neurons. And in case of somatic nervous system, it also consists of motor neurons. But the difference lies in the fact that the CNS, it conducts impulses from the CNS to the skeletal muscles. Why skeletal muscles? Whenever you are drinking, whenever you are walking, whenever you are talking, you are doing it voluntarily. You are doing it voluntarily. It means these actions are performed with consciousness. So skeletal muscles perform conscious actions. So the motor neurons, they carry they conduct impulses to skeletal muscles. So it means all the conscious actions are performed by the skeletal muscles. But in case of the not the autonomic nervous system, in case of autonomic nervous system, what happens is that the motor neuron, they send impulses to the cardiac muscles, smooth muscles, and glands. Autonomic nervous system comprises of sympathetic system and parasympathetic system, which we are going to study now. Actually, cardiac muscles, do you have control over your heart? No. Do you have control over your stomach? No. Do you have control over your glands? For example, pancreas, and for example the pituitary gland, and there are many glands in the body, so we do not have control over them. These are the autonomic nervous systems. uh, these are the muscles which receive and send impulses with the help of autonomic nervous system. Autonomic nervous system is involved in in the actions which are unconscious. Whenever you are uh, whenever you are breathing, so your lungs are also made up of smooth muscles. Whenever you are your heart is pumping blood, we are not we are not able to control that activity. So this is under uh, these are not under conscious control. Sympathetic nervous system prepares body to deal with the now see sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic nervous system. Sympathetic nervous system prepares the body to deal with the emergency situations, for example, fight or flight response. During an emergency situations, system takes necessary actions. For example, whenever you see a thief coming towards you, you do two things: whether you run or you fight. So this decision is taken by this autonomic nervous system what to do. And during the emergency situation, it takes necessary action. For example, dilates pupils, accelerate heartbeat, increases breathing rate, and inhibits digestion. Why? Because all of the blood circulation goes towards your brain, and the digestion, we can't provide blood to the digestive system, and we need more oxygen, like for running or for fighting, whatever it is. And for example, um, when the stress ends, what happens now comes in the work of the parasympathetic nervous system. It takes action and it normalizes all the functions. It causes the pupil to contract, not dilate. Contract promotes digestion in which is opposite to the sympathetic nervous system, which inhibits digestion. वो inhibit कर देता है digestion को, और ये promote करता है, and it slows the rate of heartbeat and breathing rate also. But the sympathetic nervous system, it increases the heartbeat and the breathing rate. See, for example, when you run away and now you are at rest, the parasympathetic system of your brain, it it kind of cools down your body. Now the reflex action. um, so talking about the reflex action, autonomic reflex action, when the central nervous system sends impulses to the muscles and the glands, there are two kinds of actions. The higher centers of brain controls the conscious actions or the voluntary actions. Okay, this is what we have discussed again and again. Now the second point is the important point, where the impulses, where it says that the impulses are not passed to the higher centers of the brain. It results in responses which are not under conscious control. For example, these are known as involuntary actions. For example, sometimes the involuntary response which is produced by the CNS is very quick. This is known as reflex action. Okay, now remember something very important, which is that brain is not the brain is not responsible for this reflex action. The part of your body which is responsible for the reflex action is the spinal cord, and it does what it produces a response which is known as reflex action. The pathway followed by the nerve impulses for the reflex action is called reflex arc. So whenever they ask you about the reflex arc, this is the definition, that the pathway which is followed by nerve impulses for producing reflex action is known as reflex arc. The most common example of reflex action is the withdrawal of hand after touching a hot object. So this is your example, very common example. We do what? Without thinking, when there is something hot, in a micro mini second, like in a gif, it's just it within a blink of your eye, you do what? You withdraw your hand, like you move away from a hot object. This is reflex action because the spinal cord acts as a coordinator. I told you that the brain acts as a coordinator, and the spinal cord also acts as a coordinator. Why coordinator? Because it sends the messages and it receives the messages also. Now this is the time for sending the messages. The spinal cord receives the messages and does what? It sends these messages to the brain. ये तो सबको पता है. This is very obvious that it sends the messages to the brain and it receives the messages. and then sends the messages back to the body parts. Now we did not know, something we did not know was that it can generate messages also. वो messages खुद से भी बना सकता है. The heat in the temperature and the pain receptors on the skin, they do what? They these now this the sensory neurons in the skin, they send the messages to the interneuron. ठीक है? A nerve impulse is generated which is carried by sensory neurons to the interneurons. So sensory neurons are present on the skin and the interneurons are present in the spinal cord. Afterwards, what happens is that from the interneurons, see, look at this picture. This is the stimulus when you touch the hot body. Then this is the receptor, which is your hand, actually the skin of your hand. Then look at the direction of the impulse. It is going, the nerve impulse is going to the sensory neuron, and with the help of the sensory neuron and the interneurons, they carry back the message from the spinal cord. So is the brain involved? No, the brain is not involved. The spinal cord actually is sending messages. Actually it's very simple. The spinal cord sends messages without asking the brain. Understand? It is passed to the motor neurons which carry to the muscles of the this motor neuron from the spinal cord. It carries the messages to the effectors, which is the muscles of the arm. Effectors are the muscles which perform some kind of work. Okay, they are responsible for some kind of response. So what is the response? You withdraw the hand. Did the message go to the brain? No. Did the brain receive the message? No. So sometimes the spinal cord decides itself what to do, and this is why this happens, because we need the response very fast. जब तक आपके ब्रेन तक मैसेज जाएगा और जब तक वो जवाब देगा तब तक तो हाथ जल चुका होगा. So we need a very fast response. For that quick fast response, the spinal cord sends messages to the effectors. Understand? Now, as a result, the muscles contract to withdraw hand. During it, other interneurons transmit nerve impulses up to the brain, so the person becomes aware of the pain and what happened. Now see, this point is also very important, that the brain is not unaware. The brain is not unaware. Whatever the spinal cord is doing, it is sending messages to the brain also. It is sending messages up to the brain also with the help of interneurons in the form of nerve impulses to the brain, so that the person becomes aware of pain and what happened. So the brain knows that there is some kind of pain, or if there is some kind of burning on your hand, the brain knows that the hand is burnt, and what happened, whatever happened, the brain is aware of that. This is a reflex arc. This is the figure which shows the reflex arc and the reflex action. These two are kind of same things but with different definitions. They are related to each other, so you should properly know about the definitions of the reflex arc, the system, the autonomic system, the sympathetic system. We covered that today, and we covered the PNS, the parasympathetic nervous system. Okay,